My name's Chris, I'm 31, and until recently I thought I was pretty good at reading people. I thought I could see red flags before they became fires, thought I could spot ulterior motives behind a smile. Turns out, I was a little too confident in that skill, because I never saw this one coming, not from the woman I was planning to spend the rest of my life with. Let me set the stage. I grew up in a pretty average family. My parents were teachers, hardworking but frugal, and they drilled into me the value of saving, building, and not depending on anyone else to hand you things. I carried that mindset into adulthood. I wasn't rich, but I had worked my way up in my career, saved aggressively, and eventually got into some real estate investing on the side. Nothing flashy, I didn't tell people much about it. But by the time I hit 30, I was comfortable. Not Ferrari in the driveway comfortable, but sleep well at night and never worry about rent comfortable. Then came Emily. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party, and she was the kind of person who lights up a room without even trying. Sharp, witty, beautiful. We clicked fast. Within months, we were inseparable. She worked in marketing, came from a well-off family that loved big gestures, and she had this confidence that made you feel like life with her would always be interesting. Things moved quickly, maybe too quickly, but when you're in it, you don't question the pace. Fast forward a year and a half. We were engaged, talking about a wedding, and we just closed on a house together. It was technically my down payment, about $60,000 I'd pulled from my investments, but I put both our names on the deed. At the time it felt right. She was my future wife, after all. That's what you do when you're building a life with someone. What I didn't realize then was that her family had a very different perspective on what building a life together meant. From the first dinner I had at her parents' house, I could feel the unspoken rules. Her mom would drop little comments like, "Well, Emily has always had the best taste. I'm sure she'll guide you through the house decisions." Or her dad would say things like, "A man's job is to provide, but of course it's the woman who makes it a home." Little remarks, but layered with meaning. They saw me as the provider, and Emily as the inheritor of whatever I built. At first, I brushed it off. Families have quirks, right? But those quirks became patterns. When we hosted a small barbecue at our new place, her dad openly asked me in front of everyone what the house was worth now. I laughed it off, gave a vague answer, but he pressed, "No, seriously, Chris. You've got good timing. Market's high. That's smart money right there. You'll take care of Emily. I can see that." He said it with this approving nod, like I'd just passed a test. Emily just smiled. The comments stacked up over time. Emily's mom once joked that if I didn't keep my career growing, Emily could always move back in with them until I sorted things out. Another time, Emily herself casually mentioned she'd never change her last name after marriage. "It's not about tradition for me," she said. "I just want to keep what's mine mine." I laughed at the time and said, "Fair enough." But in hindsight, it was another clue I ignored. The real moment came at dinner one night. We were out at a nice restaurant, her parents across the table from us, the kind of place with soft lighting and waiters who glide instead of walk. Everyone was sipping wine, the conversation rolling smoothly, when Emily set her glass down and said, almost too casually, "So, I think we should get a prenup." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "A prenup?" I repeated, careful to keep my voice neutral. She smiled like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Yeah, just something simple. What's mine stays mine, what's yours stays yours." Her mom nodded approvingly, chiming in, "It's just practical these days. Protects everyone." Her dad leaned back in his chair, smirking like the thought had come from him. "Smart girl. A marriage is about love, sure, but money complicates things. Better to keep lines clear." I forced a smile, but inside I felt this slow burn start in my chest. Not because of the prenup itself. I get it. I'm not naive. Some people do that. It was the way she said it, the timing, the audience. It wasn't a private conversation between us, a thoughtful discussion about our future. It was a performance, staged with her parents as the audience. I smiled back and said, "Absolutely. If that's what makes you comfortable." The relief on her face, the smug pride on her parents, it told me everything. They weren't just protecting her. They were ensuring the wealth stayed with her side, no matter what. And that's when the thought hit me. They had no idea about the paperwork I'd signed just 2 weeks earlier. No idea that I'd already taken my name off the house deed and shifted the ownership structure. No idea that technically, Emily wasn't gaining security. She was quietly losing her claim to the very $60,000 I'd sunk into that house. I didn't say that out loud, not yet, but I tucked the knowledge into my back pocket and let them all keep smiling, keep thinking they'd scored a victory. That was the first night I started to really notice the cracks, not just in her family, but in Emily herself. And once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. Every little remark, every little demand, every entitled assumption after that only made them wider. And it all started building toward one moment, one reveal that none of them saw coming. After that dinner, something in the air shifted. Maybe it was me noticing things I used to ignore, or maybe once Emily felt like she had locked me into her rules, she stopped hiding her cards. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed some invisible line where I was no longer her partner. We were slipping into roles her family had quietly assigned. At first, it was little things. We'd go furniture shopping for the new house, and every time I suggested something, Emily would smile politely, then say, "Well, Mom thinks this one looks more timeless. Don't you agree?" And of course, her mom would beam like she'd just been crowned queen of interior design. If I pushed back even slightly, Emily would tilt her head and say, "Chris, you're great at finances, but I don't think design is your strong suit." That one stung. I laughed it off, but inside I thought, not my strong suit. I'm the one who paid for the suit. Then came the talk about expenses. I'd already put down the bulk of the house payment, covered most of the closing costs, and was paying for renovations up front. But when bills came in, suddenly they were our responsibility in a way that tilted heavily toward me. Emily would say things like, "I'll get the groceries this week, but can you cover the new fridge? It's more your thing anyway." Somehow I became responsible for the mortgage, the insurance, the taxes, and anything that had a comma in the price tag. She and her parents framed it as natural. "You're the provider, Chris." It's impressive. Emily's lucky. Her dad especially loved that narrative. Every time he stopped by, which was often, more often than I liked, he'd look around like he owned the place. He'd pat me on the back and say, "Good man. You're setting the foundation for her future." Not, "Your future together." Her future. Like I was some kind of stepping stone she was supposed to climb over. And the thing is, Emily didn't correct him. She laughed, nodded, sometimes kissed my cheek, but never once did she say, "Dad, it's our future." That silence spoke volumes. The next big moment came on a Sunday. Emily's parents had invited us over for dinner, again, and this time they wanted to talk wedding logistics. I thought we'd be discussing venues, dates, maybe guest lists. Instead, I found myself sitting at their long oak table while her mother flipped through a binder thicker than most college textbooks. "Here's the thing," she began. "Our family has always hosted weddings a certain way. Tradition matters to us. And since Emily is our only daughter, we want it done properly." "Of course," I said cautiously. She smiled sweetly, but there was steel under it. "That means the wedding should be at the country club. Minimum 200 guests. The invitations should be letterpress with foil, none of this digital stuff. And naturally, we'll have a band, not a DJ. It needs to feel elegant." I blinked. "That sounds nice. But what's the budget for all of this?" Her father cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Well, Chris, you're a successful guy, and you want to marry our Emily. It's the groom's family that traditionally pays for the wedding, but since your parents don't have that kind of money, we know it'll come from you. We'll cover the rehearsal dinner and maybe a little extra here and there." Emily nodded along like this was the most normal arrangement in the world. I couldn't help but laugh, not out loud, but this dry, bitter laugh inside my head. They were planning a party for themselves with my checkbook. I glanced at Emily, waiting for her to defend me, to say, "That's not fair, we'll split it." But all she said was, "It's not as bad as it sounds, Chris. Think of it as an investment. People will see how successful you are." That word, investment, sat in my stomach like a stone. Investment in what? In her image? In their reputation? Certainly not in us. Over the next few weeks, the pressure built. Emily's mom would text me links to florists and photographers, always with price tags in the thousands. Her dad casually mentioned that since I was handling the big things, I might as well upgrade my car before the wedding. To make a strong impression, Emily chimed in later that night. "Yeah, maybe something like a Tesla or a BMW. It would look amazing in the wedding photos." I remember staring at her, stunned. "You want me to buy a car for the wedding photos?" She laughed. "Not just for that. But think about it. You can afford it. You're not exactly struggling." She said it lightly, but I heard the entitlement underneath. She wasn't just suggesting. I could see in her eyes that she thought it was expected. Around this time, my parents started noticing things too. My mom pulled me aside after one particularly awkward dinner. She said quietly, "Chris, sweetheart, are you sure about this? They talk about money like it's nothing, but it feels like they're talking about yours, not theirs. And Emily, she doesn't stand up for you." I brushed it off at the time, telling myself she was just being protective. But deep down, I knew she was right. The tipping point, though, came one Saturday afternoon. Emily had invited her parents over to see the progress on the house renovations. I'd just finished painting one of the bedrooms myself, proud of the work I'd done, when her dad walked in, looked around, and said, "You should have just hired professionals. Emily deserves better than this patchy job." I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would crack. It wasn't patchy, it was solid work. But more than that, the way he dismissed my effort in front of Emily was humiliating. She didn't defend me. She just shrugged and said, "Maybe he's right, Chris. Let's hire someone to redo it." That was the first time I walked out of my own house to cool off. I went for a long drive, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The house was supposed to be ours, the life we were building together. But suddenly it felt like I was just a contractor, paying, working, fixing, and none of it was truly mine. And yet, despite the anger, a part of me stayed quiet. Because I had that ace up my sleeve, the knowledge that legally, things weren't what they seemed. Every time her dad made another smug remark, every time Emily dismissed my efforts, I reminded myself, they don't know. They think they're playing me, but I'm the one holding the cards. Still, the disrespect piled up. One night, after another argument about wedding costs, Emily looked at me and said, "Chris, don't be difficult. You know this is what my parents expect. If you can't handle it, maybe you're not ready for marriage." That cut deep. Not ready for marriage? After everything I'd already given? I didn't say it then, but in my mind, a line was drawn. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. The cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were fractures, spreading fast. And soon, something was going to break. Things got worse before they got better, and by worse, I mean a level of betrayal that I don't think I'll ever forget. It wasn't just a single moment. It was a buildup of little things that all led to one night that burned a scar into me. The cracks in my relationship with Emily and her family had turned into a canyon, but I kept trying to patch it up. I told myself, maybe this is normal. Maybe families just get involved too much. I told myself that Emily was under pressure from her parents, and maybe once the wedding planning was over, we'd finally breathe and just live our lives. But deep down, I knew better. The shift started subtly. One Friday, Emily came home and dropped a thick folder on the kitchen counter. I opened it, expecting to see more wedding brochures, but it was something else entirely: financial documents. Loan pre-approvals, new credit applications, investment portfolios. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled casually, like she'd just brought home a bag of groceries. "Oh, my parents and I were talking, and we think it's smart to refinance the house. The rates are pretty good right now." I stared at her. "Refinance? We just bought the place. Why would we add more debt?" Her tone shifted, sharper. "Because it's smarter long term. We can pull out equity now, invest it, and make more. My dad knows people who can help. He says it's the right move." I flipped through the folder, my pulse rising. "Emily, these are in your name only. Were you planning to take money out of the house without even asking me?" She crossed her arms, defensive. "Well, it's our house. But yes, I was going to manage it. You're already stretched thin with work. And besides, my dad says it'll secure my future." Our future. I caught that slip. My future. Not ours. Hers. I told her no. Calmly, firmly. "We're not refinancing without a conversation. And I'm not letting your dad use our house as his investment toy." She rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath, "You're being so controlling." That word hit me hard. Controlling? I was trying to protect what we'd built, and she was making secret financial moves behind my back. Still, I let it go for the moment, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But the real betrayal came 2 weeks later. It was a Saturday evening. Emily told me she was meeting her mom to go over flower arrangements, and I decided to stay home, catch up on some work. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a friend of mine, Daniel, who happened to be at the same country club Emily's family always raved about. "Hey man," he said, a little uneasy. "I didn't want to stir trouble, but are you here at the club tonight?" "No, why?" "Because I just saw Emily. She's here with her parents." And, they were sitting with a banker. They had papers out. Looked serious. My stomach dropped. I thanked him and hung up, then sat there in silence for a full minute. My hands were shaking. Papers. A banker. The timing. I knew exactly what it was. I grabbed my keys and drove to the club, my chest tight the whole way. When I walked in, I scanned the dining area and there they were. Emily, her mom, her dad, and a man in a suit. The table was covered with documents, pens, and a calculator. I stood there for a second, just watching. Emily leaned forward, signing something, while her mom beamed and her dad shook the banker's hand like they'd just closed $1 million deal. I walked up to the table, my voice calm but firm. "What's going on here?" The color drained from Emily's face. Her dad quickly stepped in, smiling too wide. "Chris, hey, we didn't expect you. We're just finalizing some paperwork. Nothing major." I picked up one of the papers. My heart pounded as I scanned the words. Loan agreement. Against the house. Tens of thousands being pulled out. And Emily's signature right there on the dotted line. "Nothing major?" I said slowly. "This is a loan against our house. Without my knowledge. Without my consent." Emily's mom huffed, like I was the one making a scene. "Don't be dramatic. It's perfectly legal. Emily's name is on the deed. She has the right. This is to protect her in case." "In case what?" I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. "In case the marriage doesn't work? In case you need a cash cushion? This isn't protecting anyone. It's stealing." Emily's dad frowned, his tone turning cold. "Careful, son. We're just making sure Emily's future is secure. You should be grateful we're thinking ahead. You'll benefit too." Emily finally spoke, her voice small but stubborn. I thought it was the smart thing to do. My parents said it would be better for us." "You're overreacting." "Overreacting." The word rang in my ears. My fiancée had just signed away equity from the house I paid for, behind my back, and she thought I was overreacting. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the papers. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, I realized I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from me. I set the papers down carefully. "Emily, we're done here. I'm leaving." Her parents immediately started protesting, her mom reaching out like she could smooth it over with a touch. "Chris, don't be rash. This is normal. Couples do this all the time." Her dad added sharply, "You're not walking out of this. You're marrying Emily. You owe her that stability." Oh, that word burned. I turned and walked out, ignoring Emily's voice calling after me. My heart was hammering, my mind racing. But one thing was clear, the trust was gone. That night, sitting alone in my car in the driveway, I thought about every red flag I'd ignored. Every comment, every manipulation, every time Emily chose her parents' approval over my partnership. It all led to this. And the worst part? They didn't even think they had done anything wrong. In their eyes, I was the problem. I was the obstacle standing in the way of what they saw as theirs. That was the night something broke in me. And once something breaks, it can't be fixed the same way again. What they didn't know, what they still didn't know, was that their little scheme wasn't going to play out the way they thought. Because while they were playing games with pens and paper, I'd already moved my pieces weeks ago. But for now, I sat there in silence, staring at the house I had paid for, realizing it wasn't really my home anymore. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to let them take another inch from me. The night I caught Emily signing those papers at the country club replayed in my head like a movie stuck on loop. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her leaning forward, pen in hand, her parents smiling proudly like they had just won something. The more I thought about it, the more surreal it felt, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life, someone too blind to see he'd been cast as the supporting character in a story he thought was his own. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the driveway until the early hours, staring at the dark windows of the house, wondering what it even meant anymore. When the sun started to rise, painting the sky in dull gray light, I finally went inside. Emily was there, waiting in the living room. She looked smaller somehow, like a kid caught sneaking out past curfew. "Chris," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I stood in the doorway, exhausted, my voice flat. "Go ahead." She wrung her hands, her eyes darting toward the floor. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought, my parents, they've always managed money well. They said it was the smart thing. I didn't think you'd react like this. I almost laughed. You didn't think I'd react to you taking out a loan against our house behind my back. She flinched, but her jaw tightened. It's not like that. You're making it sound worse than it is. I was protecting us. I was protecting me. There it was again, that slip. Protecting her. Always her. I can't do this right now, I said, shaking my head. I need space. I walked past her, went upstairs, and closed the bedroom door. I didn't even want to look at her. The following days were some of the hardest I can remember. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the loneliness that came with it. Emily's parents, of course, wasted no time spinning their version of the story. Word traveled fast through her family, and soon enough I was getting cold stares and clipped comments from her relatives whenever I saw them. At a Sunday brunch with her extended family, an event I stupidly agreed to attend out of habit, I overheard her aunt whispering, "Well, at least Emily had the sense to secure her future. Men these days can't always be trusted." I gritted my teeth, pushing scrambled eggs around my plate. Emily sat beside me, pretending not to hear, sipping her mimosa like nothing was wrong. That silence hurt worse than the words. Even at home, the atmosphere was unbearable. Conversations were clipped, meals were eaten in silence, and the house, once a place I felt proud of, felt like enemy territory. Emily kept trying to justify her actions, always circling back to the same line. "It's not a big deal, Chris. You're blowing this out of proportion." But it was a big deal. Not because of the money, though that stung, but because of what it revealed. She didn't trust me. Or maybe she didn't care enough to include me. And her parents? They saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. The stress started bleeding into other parts of my life. At work, I was distracted, staring at my computer screen for hours without making progress. Friends noticed too. Daniel, the one who had tipped me off at the club, pulled me aside one day. "You don't look good, man," he said. "What's going on?" I debated brushing it off, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. I told him everything. The prenup dinner, the constant pressure from her parents, the refinancing scheme. When I finished, he just shook his head. "Chris, this isn't a partnership. This is a setup. They're not building with you. They're bleeding you dry. You need to think about whether this is really the life you want." His words hit me like a punch. Because deep down, I knew he was right. But the thought of walking away wasn't simple. I had invested so much, not just money, but time, energy, love. And part of me still hoped Emily would wake up, realize what she was doing, and choose me over her parents' influence. But that hope shrank a little more every day. The lowest point came one evening when I overheard Emily on the phone with her mother. She was in the kitchen, her voice low, but not low enough. "Yeah, Mom, I know. No, he's still upset about it. I'm trying to calm him down. Don't worry, I'll handle him. Once the wedding's over, he'll settle into his role. He just needs to stop being so dramatic. Settle into my role. Handle me." Like I was a child throwing a tantrum instead of a partner whose trust had just been shattered. I stood there in the hallway, my chest tightening, feeling like the walls were closing in. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just unwanted. I was being managed, controlled, moved around like a piece on their board. That night, lying awake in bed beside her, I felt something shift inside me. The sadness, the anger, it was still there, heavy as ever. But underneath it, a new thought began to form. A quiet, steady resolve. If they wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to play by their rules. I remembered the look on their faces at dinner the night Emily announced the prenup. The smug relief, the certainty that they had secured her future at my expense. And I remembered the way they had no idea about the paperwork I'd already filed. The legal shift I'd made weeks earlier. They thought they were pulling the strings. But the truth was, they were dancing on a stage I had already set. Of course, I didn't say any of this out loud. Not yet. On the surface, I let myself sink into that role they expected, the quiet, brooding fiancé licking his wounds. I let Emily think she was handling me. I let her parents believe they had the upper hand. But in the back of my mind, the gears were turning. Slowly, carefully, I started to sketch out the beginnings of a plan. A way to not just walk away, but to walk away on my own terms. A way to remind them that I wasn't the naive, grateful provider they thought I was. Still, in those days, it was hard to see past the fog. I woke up each morning with a knot in my stomach. Meals tasted like cardboard. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Tired eyes, slumped shoulders, a man carrying weight he hadn't asked for. And yet, in that hollow space, something was taking root. Quietly, patiently. They thought they had broken me. But really, they were just giving me the time I needed to sharpen the edges. Because once you hit rock bottom, there's only one direction left to go. And I was starting to feel the ground beneath me harden into a foundation. One I could build something much stronger on, something they would never see coming. Hitting rock bottom did something to me. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you can either jump or turn around and climb. For weeks, I had been drowning in anger and disappointment, replaying every betrayal in my head like a broken record. But one morning, I woke up and something felt different. I looked around the house. Our house, though it never really felt like ours anymore. And instead of feeling crushed by it, I felt clear. If Emily and her family saw me as a resource to exploit, then I needed to stop thinking like their victim. I needed to take control of my life again. Not for them, not even to prove a point, but for me. It started small. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as a focus. I work in consulting, long hours, endless calls, complicated projects. Before, I had been too drained to give it my all, weighed down by the mess at home. But now, I started treating work like my personal arena. If my home life was chaos, at least here I could excel, win, and build something on my terms. Within a month, my renewed energy started paying off. My boss noticed the change and pulled me aside. Chris, whatever you're doing, keep it up. Clients love working with you. You've got a promotion coming if you keep this pace. That moment felt like oxygen after weeks underwater. For the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to be respected, valued. It reminded me that I wasn't just some pawn in Emily's family's game. I had power, and I could wield it. At the same time, I quietly began strengthening my financial footing. I doubled down on the investments I had been making before all this drama: properties, stocks, a side business I'd started with a friend. Every extra dollar I made, I pushed into those channels. It wasn't about greed. It was about building independence, a safety net that no one could touch. And remember that paperwork I had signed weeks before Emily's little refinancing stunt? That decision now felt like divine timing. While she and her parents thought they were securing her future by pulling me into debt, the reality was that she had less claim to the house than she realized. I didn't flaunt it, didn't tell anyone. I let them keep believing their narrative. But privately, I checked the paperwork again and again, savoring the quiet reassurance that I hadn't been as naive as they thought. Meanwhile, my personal life started to shift too. I leaned on my friends more, something I hadn't done in a long time. Daniel became my sounding board. We'd grab drinks after work, and he'd listen without judgment, occasionally throwing in sharp one-liners that made me laugh when I needed it most. "You're basically living in a soap opera, man," he joked once. "Except you're the only one who doesn't realize you're the main character. Time to act like it." That line stuck with me. The main character, not the sidekick, not the supporting cast. Me. Even my parents noticed the change. One evening, I visited them for dinner, and my mom looked at me with a small smile. "You look lighter, Chris. Stronger." "I feel clearer," I admitted. She nodded knowingly. Sometimes clarity comes after pain. I know it's hard, but maybe this is the best thing that could have happened. Her words echoed in my mind for days. Maybe she was right. Maybe the betrayal wasn't the end of my story, but the catalyst for a better one. Back at home, Emily noticed the shift too. She didn't understand it, but she sensed it. I wasn't arguing anymore. I wasn't sulking either. I was calm, focused. When she and her parents threw out their passive-aggressive comments or pushed their entitled plans, I no longer took the bait. I just smiled, nodded, and quietly kept doing my own thing. That unsettled them. I could see it in the way her mom's eyes narrowed at me during dinners, or the way her dad tried harder to provoke me with remarks like, "Chris, don't you think it's time you upgraded Emily's ring? She deserves more sparkle." I'd just smile and say, "We'll see." Emily, meanwhile, tried harder to win me back. She'd cook dinners, buy small gifts, act affectionate in public. But it didn't feel genuine. It felt strategic, like she was performing damage control. And because I no longer responded the way she expected, her frustration grew. She wanted me flustered, defensive, apologetic. Instead, she got calm, collected, and untouchable. That was when I realized something. Power isn't always about money or titles. Sometimes it's about composure, about refusing to let others dictate your emotions. The turning point came at a family gathering about 2 months after the refinancing incident. We were at Emily's parents' house for a big dinner. Her relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, all crammed into their polished dining room. Her dad, as usual, took the floor, bragging about the wedding plans, the country club, the smart financial moves Emily had made. At one point, he turned to me and said loudly, "We're so glad Emily has the foresight to protect her future. You must feel relieved knowing she's in such good hands." The room chuckled, some nodding along. It was meant to embarrass me, to remind everyone that Emily was the prize and I was the lucky fool hanging on. But instead of shrinking, I leaned back in my chair, smiling. "Oh, I'm not worried," I said smoothly. "Everything is exactly where it should be." Her dad frowned, clearly unsettled by my composure. Emily shot me a glance, confused, like she couldn't tell if I was bluffing or not. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I just let the silence linger, watching their confidence flicker. For the first time, I felt the shift. They weren't sure anymore. They didn't know what I knew, and that uncertainty was power. From that night on, I carried myself differently. At work, I pushed for more leadership roles and landed them. With friends, I reconnected, rebuilt bonds I had neglected. Financially, I made moves quietly, securing investments that grew faster than I expected. Piece by piece, I was rebuilding my life, not around Emily, not around her family, but around myself. And every step forward made their grasp on me weaker. The best part? They still thought they were in control. They still thought I was the dutiful fiancé, quietly falling in line. But inside, I was no longer broken. I was rising. And the higher I climbed, the clearer it became. When the time came, I'd have the leverage. Not them. Not Emily. Not her parents. Me. And they'd never see it coming. By the time spring rolled around, something in me had fully shifted. The bitterness that had weighed me down was no longer there. In its place was a calm determination, a quiet clarity that made me dangerous in ways Emily and her parents didn't recognize. They thought I had gone passive. They thought I had settled into my role as the man who provided while they orchestrated the details of my life. But they didn't know I was watching, listening, collecting. The first seed of opportunity came unexpectedly, through Emily herself. One afternoon, she came home from planning brunch with her mother and plopped a stack of papers on the kitchen counter. "Here," she said. "Can you look through these contracts? It's for the wedding venue." I flipped through them, scanning line after line of legalese. Hidden among the catering costs and deposit schedules was something that made me pause, a clause about liability coverage. It specified that the venue required proof of financial responsibility, not just from the couple, but from the individual who signed the rental agreement. And guess whose name was on the contract? Not mine. Emily's. She must have seen my raised eyebrow, because she quickly said, "Oh, don't worry, my dad and I already worked it out. I signed because I have better credit, and they wanted the bride's name. It's just standard. Better credit." I nearly laughed out loud at that one. The truth was, Emily had been floating on her parents' money for years. But the detail wasn't about the credit score, it was about the liability. For the first time, I saw a tangible way in which her family's overreach could backfire. They wanted control. They wanted everything in her name. Fine. That meant they also took the risk. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and tucked that little piece of information away in the back of my mind. The second seed came from work. My company had been restructuring, and I'd recently been asked to lead a project that brought me into contact with some sharp financial advisors. Over lunch one day, one of them, a seasoned estate lawyer named Patrick, started talking casually about asset protection, trusts, and prenups. I listened intently, asking questions without revealing too much about my personal situation. "People always think prenups are about protecting one person," Patrick said, swirling his coffee. "But here's the truth, they cut both ways. If you know how to structure your assets properly, you can make it so that a prenup benefits you just as much as it benefits the other party. Sometimes more." I leaned in slightly. "How so?" "Well," he continued, "say you've got assets in a trust or under an LLC. The prenup only covers what's legally tied to you. If you've already moved things out of your personal name, then you've essentially insulated yourself. The other side thinks they're protecting themselves, but really, they've boxed themselves in. It's all about timing and paperwork." I nodded, trying not to smile. Timing and paperwork. Two things I had already set in motion. That conversation lit a spark. Over the next few weeks, I did my homework. I met with financial advisors discreetly, asked quiet questions, and expanded the protective moves I'd already started. A new LLC here, a trust document there. Bit by bit, I shifted my assets out of reach, not just from Emily, but from anyone who thought they had a claim on me. Meanwhile, Emily and her parents kept planning their perfect wedding, oblivious. They were too focused on appearances, the venue, the guest list, the speeches, to notice that the foundation beneath them was shifting. The third and most important seed of all came from pure accident. I was cleaning out a drawer in the study one evening when I found a small notebook Emily had left behind. She was always scribbling lists, wedding tasks, shopping reminders, random thoughts. Out of curiosity, I flipped it open. Most of it was harmless, floral arrangements, playlist ideas. But near the back, I found something that made my chest tighten. A list titled Post-Wedding Plans. Underneath were bullet points. Merge finances, move Chris's accounts into joint. Encourage him to refinance. Dad says this is key. Get on deed for investment properties. Look into will/beneficiary changes. I stared at the words, my pulse hammering. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about control. They weren't planning a marriage. They were planning a takeover. And in that moment, everything crystallized. I had been thinking about revenge in vague terms, about proving them wrong, about walking away with dignity. But now I saw the scale of what they were plotting, and I realized I couldn't just defend myself. I needed to dismantle their entire game. That's when I started laying the groundwork. The first thing I did was tighten my circle. I stopped discussing personal details with anyone remotely connected to Emily's family. I even pulled back from mutual friends, keeping my life quiet and controlled. From the outside, it looked like I was subdued, maybe even resigned. But behind the scenes, I was more active than ever. The second thing I did was document everything. Every shady conversation, every time Emily or her parents hinted at financial plans, every email or text message, I saved it all. Not because I wanted to sue them or anything dramatic, but because information is power. And if things went south, I wanted to be armed with receipts. The third thing I did was start playing their game, but better. When they suggested extravagant vendors for the wedding, I agreed cheerfully, but always made sure the contracts landed in Emily's lap. When her dad pushed me about upgrades for the house, I nodded along but insisted everything be in her name, since she had the better credit. I framed it as me trusting her, empowering her. In reality, I was letting them dig their own hole deeper. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I could feel the balance shifting. Every day, I grew stronger, more certain. Every day, they grew more complacent, more arrogant. The irony was almost poetic. In their rush to secure Emily's future, they were unknowingly securing my exit. And when the time came, I wasn't just going to walk away clean. I was going to walk away stronger, freer, and with everything I had built intact. For now, though, I stayed quiet, patient, smiling when they bragged, nodding when they made demands, playing the role they expected. Because the best setups are invisible until the moment they snap into place. And soon, very soon, it would be time to stop playing along and show them just how badly they had underestimated me. When you plan something for a long time, it stops being thrilling and becomes clinical. The day I'd picked for the reveal felt oddly ordinary. Late afternoon sun, soft chatter in the courtyard, servers gliding around with trays. There were bouquets everywhere. Ironically, the same kind of arrangements Emily's mother had insisted on, and the band was doing a sound check. Everyone assumed it was just another run-through of the weekend's events. That was exactly how I wanted it. I had spent months making sure this would be clean. The trust documents, the LLC transfers, the discreet conversations with financial and legal advisors. None of it was flashy. It was boxes checked and signatures notarized. I had saved messages, emails, the little notebook with post-wedding plans, and even the audio of Emily on the phone telling her mother how she would handle me. I'd put copies of everything in a folder and placed the originals in a safe where they belonged, with me, locked and untouched. I wanted proof, not rage-fueled theatrics. The trick was timing. People think revenge is a shout. It's not. It's a measured thing. A quiet hour when the whole cast thinks the play is going to end the way they wrote it. That's the moment I stepped out. They did it how they always did. Show first, substance later. The guests began to trickle in. Emily's cousins, her old school friends, neighbors I'd never met, but who knew her parents as pillars of the community. I watched them laugh and adjust cufflinks and clink flutes. Her mom floated around, resplendent in silk, clipboard in hand. Her dad, bless him, was on a roll, telling the same story about his proud daughter for the 15th time. He kept shooting glances at me that were supposed to be appreciative. I let him think he was seeing the old meek fiancé. Just before the official rehearsal speeches started, I stood up. I didn't clear my throat or pace. I didn't try to rile anyone. I set my glass down, walked to the small raised area where toasts were meant to be given, and waited for a lull. 100 tiny conversations wrapped themselves into a hum. Then I said, plain, "Can I have everyone's attention for a minute?" You could have cut the air with a knife. Her father's smile faltered. Her mother's hand tightened around a napkin. Emily looked at me like I'd suddenly turned into someone else. I felt calm. Bitter, sure, but calm. There's a weird, freeing power in calm when everyone else expects a meltdown. I promised myself I wasn't going to make this about drama, I said. But I don't want the people we care about walking away with the wrong story. So I'm going to tell the truth. Short version first. I won't be marrying Emily. The sound that followed wasn't quite a gasp. It was 1,000 little intakes of breath. Someone laughed nervously. A child started to cry in the corner. My chest was steady. I had practiced this line in the mirror, but the mirror didn't catch the odd way the light hit Emily's face when she realized I meant it. I know that sounds sudden, I continued, and I accept that on some level it probably is. But the real surprise isn't that I'm saying it now. It's the reasons why. I nodded at the DJ, a subtle cue we'd planned. The projector at the back whirred and a slideshow began. Nothing fancy, just clear images. The notebook page with post-wedding plans circled in Emily's handwriting. Screenshots of texts where her mother advised her how best to word the refinance conversation. Emails with dates and amounts. The loan agreement, Emily's signature circled in red. Each slide landed in the room like a small, undeniable fact. I let them sink in. I didn't read the messages aloud yet. I let eyes roam. Let the murmur build. People hate to be the first to react. That hesitation is a weapon. This isn't me attacking Emily, I said quietly. This is paperwork and words. You can look at them and decide for yourselves. I felt Emily's eyes on me. Hurt, betrayal, bewilderment, and then something colder, the realization that her script was unraveling. Her parents' faces were an interesting study. First, disbelief, then indignation, then a flash of fear when they saw how tidily everything was laid out. I took a slow breath and told the room what I could without being cruel. I didn't shout accusations. I narrated facts. The notebook, the calls, the loan at the club, the repeated phrasing, protect my future, handle him, move his accounts into joint, the language that, when strung together, painted a picture. People leaned forward. The room went quieter. Her father's jaw worked. Her mother's hand went to her mouth. Then I reached for the part I'd been saving. You remember when Emily announced she wanted a prenup in front of her parents? I asked. Do you recall the smug little smiles and the speeches about practicality? Heads bobbed. They applauded a private decision made public as if it were some moral stand. What they didn't know, and what Emily didn't know, is that I'd already done my homework. At that I clicked to another slide that showed notarized documents, names and dates that, to the untrained eye, were just legal formality. 2 weeks before that dinner, I said, I transferred ownership of the house into an independent trust. I structured some of my assets under an LLC. I did it because I don't like surprises and because I value my work. Those are my choices. They are legal and they are mine. I did not do it to punish anyone. I did it to protect what I built. I watch people process it. It's funny, when you say the phrase transferred to a trust in a room of people who pride themselves on social standing, their faces flatten. They don't understand the mechanics, so their imaginations fill the silence with worst-case scenarios. That's the power of quiet competence. They assume its consequences are bigger than reality. I let them assume. Then I steered the knife in perfectly measured increments. Emily and her parents took certain steps with that house, I said. They tried to treat it like a corporate ATM. They talked about refinancing it, pulling equity, making investments in the name of securing her future. That's your right. Until you start doing that without the consent of the person who put the money in. I'm not here to litigate morality. I'm here to present facts. One by one, I displayed the texts. Messages where Emily fretted about how to phrase things to avoid my consent. A voicemail of her laughing with her mother after the signed loan papers were faxed. The banker's email confirming the application had been submitted. I did not embellish. I didn't need to. The facts were grotesque enough. When I was finished, the room felt like an auditorium after an unexpected announcement. Emily's mother was whispering with her sister. Her father's face had gone a curious shade, part red, part gray. Emily looked like she'd been punched. For the first time since everything began, I saw fear in her eyes, the fear of a plan collapsing. That was when I delivered the part that had been the quietest, most satisfying to prepare. You know what's funny? I said. They thought they were making a fortress around Emily's future. But in building that fortress in her name, they accidentally built a cage. A cage with liabilities, contracts tied to her, responsibilities she'll now face. If you want to talk about protection, let's talk about real protection. I clicked to a slide showing a line from a contract. Party of the first part shall indemnify. I didn't explain the clause thoroughly. I let people imagine legal consequences. And so, I continued, I won't marry someone who thinks the house I paid for is a piggy bank for their family. I won't be a man who's thanked for supporting a life I'm not allowed to share. I won't stand there while the people I love are spoken of as investments. I let that hang. I could see a cousin flip through photos on a phone, trying to reconcile the people in the slideshow with the smiling faces at the table. Then, almost as an afterthought, I said the thing that made some people in the room wince because it was so petty and so precise. And because I don't like leaving things to chance, I've taken steps to make sure nothing of mine gets misused. Not by her parents, not by anyone. So whatever anger you feel, if that's all you want to take away, please know I'm already protected. And I'm not leaving with my dignity dragged through a gossip column. At that, the slideshow cut to a final image. A single photograph of me, calm, standing in front of the courthouse when I'd filed the trust documents, a small white paper visible in my hand with the date and stamp. It wasn't grand. It was evidence. Silence took over in a way that felt like a physical thing. Conversation stalled mid-word. Someone started coughing. Emily's mother stood abruptly, napkin dropping on the floor. Her father's face switched from anger to a frantic flush. And then, the most dangerous thing of all, his voice rose. How dare you? Before I held up a hand. I'm not doing this to humiliate you, I said. You're doing that well enough by yourselves. I'm doing this so that everyone here can see the truth before they decide whose side to be on. You can stand with Emily and her choices. You can stand with me. But you can't stand in both places anymore. The room teetered. It felt like a breath held too long. Emily's mouth opened, closed. Her father clenched both fists by his sides. The band had stopped tuning. Their instruments hung silent. Right then, right as her father's eyes locked on me, and Emily's face crumpled in a way that didn't look like theatrics, I saw the full weight of what I'd done. I had taken all the quiet, measured moves and used them to smoke out a family that had been cozy in its certainty. I had played the long game and shown my hand. I didn't know in that moment which reaction would come first. Tears, apologies, a heated argument, a lawsuit, a social media storm. I only knew that the scene had shifted irrevocably. People were looking at each other, recalibrating. The next sound could be a shout, a sob, or the clink of a glass as someone fled. That's where I stopped speaking. My throat felt dry, but my hands were steady. I watched their faces, hungry, humiliated, furious, stunned, because the rest of it, the fallout, would be messy and loud and involve people I didn't want to drag through the mud if it could be avoided. I also knew the moment when a story reaches its tipping point. You either let it spill all at once or you close the book and let the silence do its work. So I stepped down from the small stage and walked back to my seat. The projector went dark. The courtyard noise felt distant. Emily's mother had a hand pressed to her lips. Her father's jaw was tight. Emily's eyes found mine, wide and uncomprehending. I sat down, looked at her, and said nothing. The rest of the room filled the space with a jittery sort of sound. Whispers, the clatter of a dropped spoon, someone asking a nearby server what had happened. I could feel the gravity of what I'd said in motion aiming straight at the next scene. The family's reaction, Emily's choice, the unraveling of plans. The silence after my speech stretched on so long it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. No one wanted to be the first to react, but I could feel the tremors running through the room. Shuffling feet, awkward coughs, wine glasses set down a little too hard. Emily was the first to break. Her chair scraped loudly as she stood, her face pale, but her voice trembling with anger. "You blindsided me," she hissed, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You twisted everything to make me look like some manipulative villain." I met her eyes, calm as ever. "Emily, I didn't twist anything. I showed what you wrote, what you signed, what you said. If it looks manipulative, that's because it was." Her mother jumped in, her voice sharp, desperate to regain control of the narrative. "How dare you humiliate our family like this in front of everyone? You could have talked to us privately, like an adult, but instead you put on this spectacle." I tilted my head. "Like when Emily announced the prenup at dinner with you watching. Or when you involved me in decisions about the wedding that were already made behind my back. Privacy only mattered when it served you." That stung. Her lips pressed thin, her face flushed. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Cousins leaned toward each other, murmuring. A few guests even stood awkwardly, half ready to leave, sensing the implosion had already begun. Her father finally snapped. He slammed his hand on the table, making cutlery jump. "You think you're clever, boy? You think you've beaten us? This is petty, immature. You're nothing without Emily. You wouldn't even have this life if she hadn't chosen you." That line nearly made me laugh. Instead, I leaned forward, resting my hands on the podium. Funny, because from where I'm standing, all I see is a family who tried to turn me into their workhorse and discovered I wasn't as dumb as they hoped. "You didn't choose me, Mr. Williams. I chose her. And now, I'm choosing to walk away." The words hit harder than I expected. For the first time since I'd known him, her father looked small. His bluster collapsed in on itself, and the anger drained into something else, panic. He knew, deep down, that his daughter's future had been tied to mine in ways he hadn't anticipated. And now those ties were cut. Emily's voice broke then, trembling with something that sounded almost like fear. "Chris, please don't do this. Don't throw everything away. We can fix this. I made mistakes, yes, but we can fix it." For a split second, my chest tightened. I wanted to believe her, wanted to remember the woman I fell in love with. But then I saw the notebook again in my mind. The words "merge finances" and "get on deed for investment properties" written in her own hand. Not a single bullet point had said anything about love or trust or us. I shook my head slowly. "Emily, I already fixed it. Just not in the way you wanted." Her knees buckled, and she collapsed back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Her mother rushed to her side, whispering frantically. Her father sat stiff, staring at me with eyes full of venom, but no words left. Around the room, people began to make their choices. Some guests got up quietly and slipped out, unwilling to watch the wreckage unfold. A few, mostly Emily's relatives, glared at me as they left, muttering about how heartless I was. But others, people who had seen the controlling nature of her parents over the years, approached me later, shaking my hand quietly, whispering, "Good for you," or "You did the right thing." The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next week, news spread quickly. The canceled wedding, the slideshow, the documents, rumors ran wild. In her social circle, Emily's image cracked. The narrative her parents had crafted of the perfect daughter, destined for the perfect marriage, shattered under the weight of receipts. At work, though, I thrived. The promotion came through. Clients admired my composure, and I poured my energy into building something lasting, something mine. My parents, who had watched me suffer quietly for so long, finally smiled again when they saw me walk through their door without the weight of Emily's family pressing down on me. As for Emily, I heard bits and pieces. The loan she signed, it went through, but without my name tied to it. The liability fell squarely on her shoulders. Her parents scrambled to cover it, draining resources they'd boasted about for years. The country club venue contract? In her name, too. Non-refundable deposits added insult to injury. All the moves they'd made to secure themselves had become anchors, and they had chained those anchors to her, not me. The last time I saw her was months later, by chance, at a cafe downtown. She looked tired, worn down in a way I'd never seen before. She spotted me, froze, then gave a small, strained smile. "Chris," she said softly, "you look good." I nodded politely. "I am." She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, but in the end she just looked away. For the first time, I realized she understood the cost of what had happened. not just losing me, but losing the future her parents had promised her. I walked away from that cafe with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for what could have been, but relief for what I had avoided. Because in the end, revenge wasn't the slideshow or the legal paperwork or the humiliation. The real revenge was walking away with my life, my dignity, and my freedom intact, while they were left drowning in the consequences of their own greed. And as I closed the door behind me that day, I felt lighter than I had in years. The final thought that crossed my mind, clear as a bell, was this. They thought they'd written my role in their story, but I was never their character. I was the author, and I had just written the ending.